Hello YouTube, Bane666 here. So recently I just saw a video by everyone's favourite fanatical feminist and amateur cultist Steve Shives, in which he talked about the mythos meetup, Sargoon, and probably most people who are watching this video. So let's have a look at a clip from that.
That three of the featured speakers were professional YouTube misogynists and racists and rape apologists and just generally awful people with fan bases of similarly awful people. And those three people were first on a double bill, Armored Skeptic and Shoe on Head, two absolutely vile, disgusting human beings who bully trans people, who promote misogynist, sexist, racist talking points, who are two of the most vile, disingenuous, awful people that I can think of. And one of the few people I can think of who is worse than they are is the other person that I'm talking about, who was invited to be a featured speaker at MythCon, which is Carl Benjamin, also known as Sargoon of Akkad, one of the most disgusting human beings on the planet, who made the newspaper in the UK last year for sending a rape taunt to a member of parliament who was herself a survivor of sexual assault. And the occasion for Mr. Benjamin sending her this rape taunt was that she was gaining some publicity for being part of a campaign to end online harassment. Wonder why he felt threatened by that.
Well, you know, Steve, that is one way of looking at events, but I think I'll let Grim Jim explain another point of view.
So here's the context. Jess Philips is a British MP, an ardent feminist, and if you'll allow me to get genuinely angry rather than sarcastic just for a moment, someone who has repeatedly attempted to block discussions on men's issues in Parliament on International Men's Day, and who has openly laughed about the idea of even discussing the rates of male suicide. This is a horrendous cunt of a woman. Fuck her and everything she stands for. Now, does the fact that she's
horrible cunts
excuse any genuine harassment towards her? No, of course not. Of course it doesn't. Okay, not at all. But that's not what we're talking about here. Anyway, at the time, she was on something of a press round to support Take Back the Internet, which was an initiative that she was involved in. And yet another in a long line of attempts by her to back censorship of the Internet. Now, needless to say, Carl and any other reasonable human being on the planet knows that this kind of censorship is an incredibly bad idea, and that using spurious internet threats, which is what she was doing, to fuel and excuse your censorship is profoundly disingenuous. And in particular, she was emphasizing online rape threats, and she was emphasizing how these things affect women. Though, if you look at Pew and any number of other surveys, you'll see that the chief victims of online harassment are men. They just don't seem to make as much of a fuss about it for whatever reason. So she was using her status as a supposed rape victim and these supposed rape threats that anyone with a lick of sense knows are entirely spurious to back this push for internet censorship. She was going around and around the press talking about this. Oh, I get hundreds of rape threats online. Well, how many times have you been raped as a result of them? Right, horrible as they are, they're meaningless. And the same goes for any number of other online threats against anyone and in any form. Anyone with a lick of sense or the slightest bit of internet experience knows they're spurious. Carl knows they're spurious. So Carl sets this trap for her, and I think it's a brilliant Chris Morris-like trap for her. He sets out and he says, because she's complaining about rape threats, let us not forget, this is the context, he says that he wouldn't rape her. No, wait, sorry, apparently this is super important. He said, at least in the tweet, if not in the video, I wouldn't even rape you. Apparently the even is super important and has some kind of alchemical magic that turns an anti-threat into a threat. So he says specifically, you're so worried about these online rape threats. Don't worry, I wouldn't rape you. I wouldn't even rape you. Which is just an emphasizer with an undertone, a subtext of you're such a hideous person that I wouldn't even consider it. If you want to unpack the entire thing into what's implied as well as what is explicitly said, it's I wouldn't have consensual sex with you, I wouldn't even rape you, you're ugly. Again, that's it. But here is the brilliant thing about it. She then goes out again into the media. Carl traps her into going on television and complaining that hundreds of men don't want to rape her.
Wearing a t-shirt like this, the online paedophile can disguise himself as a child.
Having previously gone around and complained about rape threats.
Online paedophiles can actually make your keyboard release toxic vapors that make you suggestible.
Oh, it's terrible, there's all these people who want to rape me online. Oh, it's terrible, there's all these people who don't want to rape me online. It's brilliantly Mauritian in the way that it exposed her stupidity, her hypocrisy, her disingenuousness, and the disingenuousness of a complicit media. It was absolutely perfect. Anyone who thinks that it's somehow a threat of rape is...
So it's pretty clear that Sargoon was not trying to silence Jess Philips with a threat of rape, but instead trying to make a political point. Now, I know when most people refer to trolling, they're talking about someone who says something offensive, someone that says something they find personally offensive, basically anyone who's just being an asshole online. But the word troll actually has a bit of a different meaning. You see, you can troll someone to make a political point. In fact, a very, very good example of this are two guys who call themselves the Yes Men. They could be described as real-life trolls.
Well, joining us live from Paris now is Jude Finisterra. He's a spokesman for Dow Chemical.
Today, I'm very happy to announce that for the first time, Dow is accepting full responsibility for the Bhopal catastrophe.
This interview was inaccurate.
The hoax was an elaborate one. The prank knocked 3% off Dow's shares.
Well, I wouldn't say it's a hoax. It's an honest representation of what Dow should be doing.
Louisiana officials are taken for a ride by the Yes Men.
The Yes Men? The Yes Men travel the world pulling pranks at corporate events.
My name is Fred. I'm from Halliburton.
My name is Francisco Guerrero.
I'm Northrop Goody. I'm with the World Trade Organization.
Rastus Ham is going to be speaking.
Ooh. Sick, twisted.
I say you're a liar.
My name's Mike.
And I'm Andy. This is a movie in which the two of us
Fix the world. You want something that's going to be able to save a human being no matter what Mother Nature throws at him. And so this is the Halliburton Survivaball.
We'll be happy to take any questions. Without oil, at least 4 billion people would starve, and starving would become the new black.
Expecting the next knock at the door to be Dow's lawyer.
No idea what Dow will do. They threatened us.
I'm being... are you allowed to do that to me?
We are preparing to go to the Gulf Coast Reconstruction Conference, and CNN is going to be covering it live.
ExxonMobil is earmarking $8.6 billion to finance wetlands rebuilding.
Pulled off a heck of a hoax.
Thank you.
Maybe it'll take a host like this to bring them out here to see what we're going through.
I thought that was a wonderful thing to do.
This is actually truth-telling where normally there would only be lies.
If you could demonstrate the turtle position, please, that would be great.
If you haven't seen the Yes Men movies, I highly recommend it. Now, some people may find what Sargoon said, or even what the Yes Men do, offensive. And it's their right to do so. However, trying to claim that Sargoon's intent was to silence a rape victim through threats and intimidation is an outright lie. And that's exactly how Steve and his group have packaged this. They've taken out all nuance, all context of what Sargoon was actually trying to do, and instead used it as a weapon to try to silence someone they disagree with, which, for the record, is the exact same thing that Sargoon was criticising Jess Philips for.
Everybody who is a part of inviting you have signaled to the women in the movement, you do not give a shit about using rape as a threat to bully somebody. That's what you have signaled.
That's the point, and the whole point of it was to demonstrate that I would say, I won't do something, and you will say, that's a threat.
Oh, it's just a coincidence that you said rape. It's a coincidence that you didn't say, I won't murder her, I won't... why did you name all the crimes? Go through all the crimes. Arson, I want to... It's a coincidence.
No, it's entirely deliberate. The thing is,
because she's a victim of sexual assault.
You don't know anything about
You know that you can use her previous trauma as a cudgel to bully
to do with her trauma. And you know it, and she knows it, right? She was parading around saying, look, I think I get all these rape threats, and therefore I want to control the internet. And she's an MP, so it's not like she's powerless, right? And I said, right, look, the point I was making is, regardless of what she...
Of course, the usual suspects crawled out the woodwork, including PZ Myers.
First of all, I will confess to my sympathies. They are entirely with Thomas Smith. That when I saw the clip where Carl Benjamin was confronted with his remarks to a sexual assault victim, and he simply turned to the audience and smirked and waved his hand and got a lot of cheers and applause, he lost me. Yes, he clearly won over the audience by mocking a sexual assault victim, but he did not win me over. And that's in part why I felt compelled to make this video, is that this is a problem in the atheist movement. That we have people who are so committed to one principle, the principle of free speech, that they're willing to dismiss trivialities like the rights of women and minorities, the ability of women to attend our conferences without harassment, just in general throwing away a huge portion of our atheist audience for the right to be able to harass them. And that has to end. But the thing is that what I want them to stop doing is I want them to stop feeling like they have the right to rape people. I know most of them have no interest in rape. But I also want them to stop feeling like it's a legitimate silencing tactic to try and intimidate people with rape threats. And many of them do that. Carl Benjamin does that. And I consider that to be grossly wrong, and that we need to oppose that. And I am indeed willing to encourage society to develop rules and methods for preventing people from continuing this kind of ghastly behavior. Now, the question is that a bad thing? Is this intolerable, that someone would think that society should compel individuals within that society to abide by the rules of the society? And I don't think it is. I'm sorry, if you are benefiting from the privileges of living in that Western civilization you love so much, then you should be willing to abide by the rules of that civilization. So I will shame people for applauding white nationalists, or cheering for misogynists, or silently standing by even to enable discrimination. And I don't think I'm out of line to do that. So I believe in a social contract, that if you benefit from the shared values of a community, then you're obligated to abide by the core rules of that community. Now, there are exceptions. I got to point these out. As an atheist in a predominantly Christian society, of course I'm going to kick back against some of the rules that are trying to constrain me. And you should feel the same way too. If there are truly oppressive rules, then yes, you also have a moral obligation to oppose them. So, for example, here's the deal. I'm an atheist. I'm going to push against those boundaries. So I'm willing to blaspheme because I think blasphemy is not a crime, and I think everyone ought to have the right to choose their own religion, or no religion at all. So I will directly act to undermine that rule of society. But what I see going on in the atheist community now is not so much that, is that some atheists are fighting for the right to bully women with rape threats. And they're complaining about things like consent. They're complaining about things like rules of conduct at conferences. And I know the reasoning. I understand where you're coming from. You're trying to say that in the name of these sacred free speech, holy of holies, we have to allow this right to harass women, because if we start restricting that, the next thing you know, they're going to tell us that we can't vote or something. That there's a slippery slope argument hiding in there. But aren't there better ways to advance that goal of freedom of speech than to, for instance, join Carl Benjamin in brigading a victim of sexual assault with further taunts about rape?
So what is happening here is that instead of engaging in a rational conversation with your opposition, people like Steve Shives and P.Z. Myers first of all create a boogeyman. They demonize their opposition. They characterize them as basically being inhuman monsters.
A professional sexual harasser and rape apologist was a featured guest at an atheist convention.
And claim that these people want horrendous things, that their actions are immoral.
It's just when you start fighting for the right to treat women like chattel, or to discriminate against minorities, or to throw immigrants out of the country, then you're not fighting for rights other than your right to oppress.
Once you've reduced your opposition down to these stereotypes, these straw men, then you can argue that they should be banned.
And if one of you has a big YouTube channel or a popular podcast or a popular blog and you have a big audience, you should be fucking blackballed.
And doing this saves you actually having to address any issues or any points they may bring up. It's essentially a very complex derailing tactic. You essentially attack the person and not the arguments that the person makes. And the thing is, people like P.Z. Myers don't exactly have a squeaky clean background. In fact, many of them have used harassment as a silencing tactic in the past.
If P.Z. Myers hasn't accused you of anything, at the very least being a harasser, misogynist, or rapist, it's because you're practically invisible and you really need to up your profile. So, that out of the way, here's the latest from P.Z. Myers' wonderful world of rape and repression. Myers is spiraling down the drain so fast, like an uncharismatic tidy bowl man in a punctured dinghy, that he managed to completely disappoint and then piss off blogger and chairperson of Atheist Ireland, Michael Nugent. Having accomplished that feat against Nugent, a man normally so irritatingly even-tempered and unflappable that getting him to raise his voice pretty much requires setting him on fire, P.Z. Myers then proceeded to have his ass handed to him in a most spectacular manner. Amputated ass firmly in hand, Myers then began flailing around in a way that could only be described as perfectly delightful. Never one to try to make any sense when a good baseless accusation will do, Myers accused Nugent of defending and providing a haven for harassers, misogynists, and rapists. I used that phrase before. You thought that was hyperbole. It's actually a quote from P.Z. Myers. Can you imagine that? An academic, a 57-year-old adult man, getting so twisted out of shape by someone disagreeing with him, and that someone allowing others to disagree as well on his own blog, that Myers dismisses criticism as coming from harassers, misogynists, and rapists. Nugent's latest post on this matter chronicles P.Z. Myers' fat old white guy contortions with Derek Walsh on Twitter, in which he is willing to do anything, distract any way he can, to avoid backing up his claim that Nugent is providing a haven for harassers, misogynists, and rapists. Although I do have to take issue with Nugent's title, P.Z. Myers has failed 5 times to justify a smear that I am defending and providing a haven for rapists on my blog because, it's so vague, and also to point out that for P.Z. Myers, only 5 sequential failures makes for a pretty good day.
One of the links that Matt Kavanagh had put to was somebody who posts under the name of Skeptical, who had made some comments with regard, some slightly, I don't know how serious they were, but they didn't look like a serious fucking medical analysis. It was a bit scurrilous, a bit nudge nudge wink wink along the lines of P.Z. Myers, or could he have got a sexually transmitted disease from this conference given that he's just been into a hospital for this or that, and then posted a few links to, I think it was medicine.net or medicinenet.com or something like that. And as a result of that, what P.Z. Myers has done, P.Z. Myers has exposed this person's real name, has exposed what this person's employer is, has exposed what this person's profession is, because they have got a medical qualification, they are a medical professional. And as a result of that, Skepchick, who are very much in bed with Free Thought Blogs, of course, has got on board with this and has tweeted about it and included the Twitter username of this individual's employers, presumably in a bid to try and get them in trouble. Now, they are doing this on the grounds that it's unprofessional, it's against medical ethics to make sort of scurrilous online diagnoses, especially if it involves something like a sexually transmitted disease. That's on the one hand. On the other hand is the claim that they're always making, that they don't like dropping people's docs, that they don't think you should be contacting people's employers, that these are all shit tricks to pull. Also, on the other hand, is the fact that this person, Skeptical, posts as an anonymous blogger, doesn't post as a medical professional, doesn't state that they're a medical professional.
He decides that Skeptical is a soft enough target to go after with a good doxing, using information gleaned from her participation on Free Thought blogs. Remember, doxing, or dropping docs, involves revealing an otherwise anonymous internet user's personal information, name, address, place of employment, to leave them theoretically open to real-world harassment. Doxing, by design, is intended to leave a breadcrumb trail for potential harassers, and so is, at its very core, an intended terror tactic, albeit a pussy-ass one at that. For someone so obsessed with supposed harassment, threats against women, and doxing, Myers has absolutely no moral qualms about printing Skeptical's name and linking to the hospital where she works. He also leads from the rear by encouraging his brain-dead minions to contact her employers, writing, "I think the hospital should know what one of their doctors does in her spare time, so I'm not going to shy away from mentioning her name." Remember, this is a man who so styles himself to be a defender of women and foe of sexism that he thinks to oppose him for whatever random horseshit he's up to means you're a harasser and a misogynist and maybe even a rapist. However, when convenient, and these principles of his are all about convenience, Myers is more than happy to subject a woman to actual harassment at the hands of his own useful idiot readership, who are given to violent rhetoric involving anally inserted porcupines, further ass play with rusty knives, and getting out there in the real world and fucking with people. I can only assume that in Myers' twisted logic, in order to save women, you have to destroy some of them. And so, coming as no surprise to anyone, P.Z. Myers is a scumbag, a hypocrite, and a fuzz-covered little cowardly shit. Myers' persistent refrain, taking a page from the social justice warrior dirty playbook, is that opposition to him means adopting a whole steamer trunk of baggage, including sexism, misogyny, harassing behavior, and not only being a rape apologist or a rape supporter, whatever in the hell that means, but these days, because old Peases has upped the ante, an actual rapist. He's a sad and pathological little man. And that some people actually buy his "I'm a totally non-sexist champion of feminism and defender of women" act means there are some people, as unlikely as it may seem, that are sadder and more pathological than he is.
So P.Z. Myers and friends are more than willing to accuse someone of being a misogynist, a rape apologist, or even a rapist. We'll get to that in a minute. When it's convenient, when it's used as a silencing tactic to shut up someone who is criticising him. Yet at the same time, he's willing to dox women, threatening behaviour, once again when it's convenient to silence them. It wouldn't be hard to conclude that maybe he's not really that interested in the safety of women at all. Maybe he's just more interested in silencing his opposition. But let's talk about P.Z. Myers actually accusing people of being rapists. In August 2013, P.Z. Myers wrote a piece accusing Michael Shermer of being a rapist. So how did P.Z. Myers know that Michael Shermer was a rapist? Well, P.Z. was told by an anonymous source. Now we'll get to this anonymous source in a minute, because since that time she has come forward and we'll discuss the details of that particular case, as we know them anyway. But before then, let me just say that it's exceptionally hard to defend yourself against an allegation from an unknown anonymous source. How exactly are you meant to do that, I have to ask? Now, I have no idea if Michael Shermer is in fact a rapist, or whether he's been falsely accused, or whether he's just a sleazebag. I don't know. I honestly don't know. There have been a lot of people coming forward since that allegation. Some of the claims are pretty weak. Others I honestly don't know. But that's not the point. The point is making an accusation against someone when they have no real means of defending themselves is a pretty fucking low thing to do. And if we're just going to accept anonymous sources as legitimate information, then anyone can make any claim against absolutely anyone. I could claim that, hey, someone told me P.Z. Myers is a pedophile. Now, obviously that's not true, but playing by that standard, I could make that claim and just say, well, someone told me. I can't reveal who. I have to keep that source anonymous. And how exactly would PZ defend himself against such a claim? When you don't have the person's name, you don't have a time or a date, you're just defending yourself against a vague allegation. So what about the actual allegation towards Michael Shermer? Well, let's look at the details as we know them. Now, obviously, I wasn't there that particular night in 2008, and neither were you, unless you're Michael Shermer, Alison Smith, or Jeff Wagg. So we can only go by the accounts as they've been told by those three people. And I'm mainly going to focus on the accounts of Alison Smith, who is the alleged victim, and Jeff Wagg. We'll get to Jeff in a minute. So apparently what happened was Michael Shermer took a very, very drunk Alison Smith back to his room, and they proceeded to have sex. Now, Alison Smith claims that he got her drunk, he plied her with alcohol, and she was too drunk to consent. So, sometime after the alleged rape, Alison Smith rings Jeff Wagg to come pick her up from the hotel. Now, the claim is she was so drunk that Jeff Wagg had to wheel her out in a wheelchair. Now, you may be asking who Alison Smith and Jeff Wagg are. Well, Alison Smith was one of the organisers of TAM. So basically, she is one of the people who organised for Michael Shermer to be there and to talk. Jeff Wagg is her boss, and at the time was also her boyfriend. I have no idea if they're still together. Now, Jeff clearly claims that when he went to pick her up, she told him that she had been raped. And Jeff Wagg, who was both her boss and her boyfriend, decided to do nothing. Now, I think most people in that situation would have been going up to Michael Shermer's room and possibly beating the shit out of him, right? That would be most people's reaction. But Jeff Wagg decided to do nothing. Now, look, to be totally fair, maybe he wanted to and she talked him out of it. Neither of them have claimed that, but maybe that's a possibility. That could have happened. Let's be 100% fair. But then both of them wrote positive reviews of the conference afterwards, as if nothing had happened. Okay, once again, let's be 100% fair. Let's say that they were trying to keep professional and not let it influence future conferences, and she wanted to keep it private. Fair enough. It's possible. But then 2 months after the supposed rape, Alison Smith posted this picture on her blog. So this is Jeff Wagg, and this is Michael Shermer, and this is Alison Smith. Does this look like a picture of a rapist and her victim and the victim's boyfriend? I would expect the boyfriend to have his hands around the supposed rapist's throat. That would be most people's reaction. Maybe that's not in his nature, though. Maybe Alison talked him out of it beforehand, said, don't make a fuss. Okay, that's possible. Unlikely, but I'm being as generous as possible here. But why would she then post a picture of it on her blog? Why would she write, where I spent another lovely portion of the evening with Dr. Michael Shermer? This is her personal blog. No one's forced her to do this. Jeff Wagg and Alison Smith also continued to invite Shermer to future events, which is strange, because if they're convinced that he's a rapist, why would you invite him to future events and endanger the women at those events, right? That seems a bit strange to me. Now, I see there being three possibilities here. The first possibility is events went down as described by Alison Smith and Jeff Wagg, which is a little strange. Both Jeff Wagg and Alison Smith aren't acting as if Shermer is a rapist, so yeah, the account is a bit strange. The second possibility is that Shermer did get Alison Smith drunk, and she was too drunk to consent, and Jeff Wagg did come and pick her up, but he's lying about her telling him that particular night, and she kept it a secret for a number of years. The third possibility is that both Alison Smith and Shermer got very drunk and had sex. You know, it was a bit of a groupie thing because she was a fan of his, and then called her boyfriend to pick her up afterwards. And somewhere down the track, this got turned into a rape. Now, I have no idea which of those three is what happened. Who knows? But surely we should be somewhat suspect of the events as described by Alison Smith and Jeff Wagg. Now, I'm sure there are some people out there who are saying sometimes rape victims act in strange ways that you wouldn't expect. And, you know, there can be some truth in this. But when a rape victim acts in such a way that it appears that she isn't a rape victim, then surely we should ask the question, is the allegation true? I mean, that's being a skeptic, right? To ask questions. And if it appears that a rape hasn't taken place, then surely asking questions would be the logical thing to do, right? But instead we're told we should always believe the victim, and that if you question the victim, you're being a misogynist and you're promoting rape culture. We're told that the percentage of false allegations is, well, it almost doesn't exist. Therefore, we shouldn't even consider that as a possibility. We should just take the victim's word for it. And we know she's a victim because she says she is. We should just believe that too, without any actual skepticism. And suggesting that a woman might lie for revenge or for personal interest, well, that's part of rape myths, and that's part of rape culture, and anyone who says that is a misogynist. This is the type of thing we hear from Steve Shives and PZ Myers all the fucking time. Which is really, really interesting, because PZ Myers himself admits to being falsely accused of rape and sexual assault. But it seems that's different when it's happened to him. Back in 2010, he left a comment saying how a female student came into his classroom. She was unhappy with a bad exam grade and threatened to say that he had sexually assaulted or raped her if he didn't change the grade. So PZ immediately went to the higher-ups in the university and got the allegation squashed before it went anywhere. Now, the interesting thing is that people like Sargoon and myself would defend PZ in this case. We would say, let's look at all the information and then make a decision, right? Because possibly it's a false allegation. There might be another side to the story. We shouldn't just believe the alleged victim. But if we were to apply the standard used by PZ Myers and Steve Shives, we should just assume that PZ is guilty. We should now assume that PZ Myers is a rapist, and any atheist convention which is willing to have him there, even as a guest, is promoting rape culture. Once again, this is their standard, not mine. I want you to keep that in mind. So I have to ask, where are the videos from Steve Shives demanding that monsters like PZ Myers should be kept out of atheist conventions? After all, using their standards, PZ Myers is a rapist, and he harasses women. He doxes women when they say things that he doesn't like. Clearly, he's a danger to women, and to protect women, we need to ban people like PZ Myers, right, Steve? To my knowledge, you've never criticised him. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So I have to ask, why is there this double standard? Why is it that when it comes to people like PZ Myers, there's one standard, but when it comes to people like Sargoon, Shoe on Head, and Ahmed Gregg, why is there a different standard? Why is it in those cases you always assume the worst possible scenario?
And yeah, I've had a lot of experiences like that, just moving through the feminist world and just being shown no mercy. Nobody ever wants to assume that you are just a person who means well, you know? You always mean the worst. It's always that you're a bigot. You know, you are just a racist, you are just a transphobe, that's who you are, and we hate you for it. And that's kind of been my experience moving through this world, even though my whole thing is like, I don't think people should hate people because of their skin color or their sex or their gender identity or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of dissonance.
I don't believe it's about protecting women like you claim. I don't believe it's about fighting rape culture and the racist and the misogynist and all the other bullshit that you go on about. I believe it's just a tactic to silence your opposition. That's it. Nothing more complex needed. Someone disagrees with you, someone you don't like, you accuse them of all kinds of fucking bullshit, you demonize them as much as possible, you turn them into a fucking monster, you attack the person, and that way you don't have to deal with any of their arguments. This is propaganda, nothing more. It's anti-intellectual fucking bullshit. not to mention massive amounts of hypocrisy. And this is the standard shit we get from Steve Shives and PZ Myers. And unfortunately for them, it's the best they got. It seems to be their only tactic. They try to silence their opposition because they're afraid of people hearing what they've got to say. And that's something we'll talk about more next time.
For all the talk of threats and harassment and doxing coming from Free Thought Blog's social justice wankfest, the only demonstrable threats, harassment, and doxing has come from Free Thought Blogs and similar social justice outfits. Claiming to be victims is part of their playbook. More importantly, the claim gives them cover to victimize others.
Now get me to that first video that you did.
Right, yeah. So I had been talking to people for a long time. And anybody who's a good friend of mine knows that I've always thought this stuff is bullshit for a long time. Like, I vent to them and have had a lot of really bizarre experiences in feminist spaces that were just a lot to process. My friends, you know, they have been really supportive and like, yeah, this is weird. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you.
Can you give me like a really solid example of that?
Well, like in the video, I talked about how people have tried to physically intimidate me in person. People who are feminists, who I agree with on stuff. You know, maybe not 100%, but like 90 maybe. I don't know. And people who try to gang up on me, who threatened to rape me, who threatened to, you know, I had this group of people at it was like a group of trans activists folks who threatened to punch me in the face out when I was in a parking lot. And I'm just like, oh, that's my brain. What? I like can't, why? What did I do?
Yeah,
you know?
Even though from everything I've seen of yours, I've never seen even the slightest amount of transphobia or
I am all here for people who are trans. Like, seriously. I do not give a shit. I support them. I think society treats trans people like shit, you know, and I'm in that fight with them and always have been. I've advocated, you know, at the state and federal government level for trans rights and, you know, taught trans-inclusive sex ed the entire time. I mean, it's just, it's weird. Yeah. So those types of things that have happened. So what was it?
So you do this video, you start saying some of this stuff. And really what you, more than anything else, the takeaway from the video is, I want to talk to people.
That's literally all the video says.
Yeah, I mean, that's...
And I think that like, I want to talk to people because I think things have gotten a little out of control in the feminist sphere. It's super pro-censorship. Like, overtly like, we are going to campaign to get you censored. You know, and I actually had a friend of mine, a good friend of mine, this is actually, I'm still processing it, a good friend of mine who, you know, is campaigning after I came out with this stuff. A good feminist friend of mine, we had planned to go travel together, and we've traveled a lot together already, who wanted to make a petition, you know, to shut my channel down, or I don't even remember exactly what it was, but it was just like, what the hell? Like, this is someone I'm pretty good friends with. Like, it's very overtly, we don't, like, the goal is to silence. No other opinions should be heard because it's oppressive. I'm oppressive now.
So even though you intellectually knew that thing existed, were you shocked when it became that personal? Because I had the exact same thing, even though for me it wasn't talking about feminism, but when I started talking about what I saw wrong with the left and the speech stuff and the authoritarianism, I lost a ton of friends. Co-workers of mine stopped talking to me, but friends. I mean, some people that were invited to my wedding.
That's really messed up.
Yeah,
I mean, same for me.
So when you would have those conversations, so I'll just give you one anecdotal thing from myself, and maybe you have one for you. There was one person who I was incredibly close to, and they started telling me privately on text that what a bigot I am and blah blah blah, and I kept saying, "Can you show me evidence of anything that I've said is bigoted? You know me really well. We've, you know, been to my house 1,000 times for dinner. We've gone through personal stuff and cried together and all of this stuff." And I couldn't get one example of anything. It's just, no, you're a bigot, you're a bigot, you're a bigot. So when your friend, you know, then starts doing this protest against you, I mean...
It's not just friends.
Yeah, so were you able to make headway with any of them, or did it all just, like, melt at the same time?
I've
And the
lost
reason
a lot
I'm
of
asking you this so
friends.
specifically is because I'm sure you do too, but I get a ton of email about this, that from my audience, when they start talking about this stuff, or they share clips or whatever, that suddenly friends are blocking them or defriending them and all that stuff.
Oh, God. What has this world come to?
Yeah.
Priorities misplaced. You know, you can't even have friendship anymore. Yeah, I mean, for me, I have lost a lot of friends. People who I have let into my home, who, you know, I've made dinner for many times, who, again, you know, we've had the moments, we've laughed, we've cried, who turned on me in a heartbeat. The moment I said that I was against censorship, which is very strange.
Yeah.
And it's been really hard because it's been like, well, I feel kind of lost now. My community has turned on me in a sense. But maybe they were never my community to begin with. Like what I said before, I sort of, just by proximity and sort of being nudged in this direction, have, you know, met all these people and built these relationships. And a lot of those relationships I felt like were kind of fake to begin with. Like you always feel like you're being judged.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I feel like hanging out with people who are super, super SJW feminist types.
Yeah.
It's like you can't relax, you can't tell a joke, you're like worried that everyone's going to be offended all the time. It's just like a very,
right,
can we just calm down?
You're just on that like hairpin of like, I might say something wrong accidentally and then it's all over. Like that's not a fun way to have a friendship.
No, and it's so easy to say something wrong. It's such a bizarre, arbitrary high bar, and it's not a good precedent for friendships and relationships, and I never liked it, you know? I never felt connected to those people. There was maybe only one or two people that I really felt like we had a connection who turned on me publicly. But then, like, all these people that are internet friends of mine, who I've never met in person or anything, but who, you know, we share each other's work, we talk online, whatever, also turned on me. So it's been sort of this ripple effect as people just sort of, you know, cast me out of the club. And that's been very revealing, you know? If this is what gets you thrown out, then fuck you, throw me out. I don't give a shit.
It's so interesting because just getting to know you in this half hour or whatever, it's like you did this once already in life. You did this when you were 16 or 17.
Bingo.
And
it's
then,
just a replay for me. It's literally the same exact thing.
Yeah.
It's like you have this community that is organized around moral principles, and you feel really repressed and shamed and restricted whenever you commit a thought crime, and you have to confess and you have to apologize when you make a mistake, but your apology is never really good enough. You always are deep down an original sinner, you know, and you have to be cast out. You're going to be excommunicated if you make too many mistakes. It's the same exact thing.
And so
as
many
being
of them,
Mormon.
so many of them hate religion, but they'll give you original sin, which is a whole other thing.
It's these moral systems, you know. They all work the same way.
Right, whether they're moral, whether they're religious or secular,
And that's like on another note, like that's a big question that I'm trying to figure out is how do we create moral systems for humans without devolving into this trash?
Way back when free thought blogs, in the form of yet another self-styled defender of women, the human suppository Greg Layden, attempted to dox me, but using an old address, because he's an idiot, only managed to put my ex-wife at risk. A strange record, or remarkably poor aim, for supposed defenders of women.